by Thrive and Awesemo.com. It is your old pal Emac coming to you with Adam Ship, my money share, as we are laughing at the Washington Wizards. Apparently, they had to get those malcontents out of the way and played John Wall a million minutes in a meaningless game in order to be good again, Adam.
Yeah, it's crazy what happens when you get rid of Austin Rivers. Great things happen.
It is one of those oddities. Sam Decker, who knew? Who knew? That's all the Wizards needed was just Sam Decker. So, in any event, let me see if we are live. All right. Well, let me double check because it looks like I may be in the wrong room. Always fun. Always fun. This is the beauty of having me do things instead of Josh, because it gets a little wacky here behind the scenes. He was kind enough to set up most of the shows here for us, but this one I had to do. There we go. We are live. Excellent. Thank you very much for letting me know that. Adam, how did your football day go yesterday on Sunday? Mine was sad. The Seahawks lost in overtime to the 49ers. And I played in the that big giant tournament over on that one site that we're not going to mention. $200 in entries. I cashed for $200. Woohoo! It was a wash.
Yeah, my football Sunday was about the same as always. Didn't win any money, so it's definitely my most consistent sport. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I see I have the wrong wizardry page up here for the old YouTube, so I'm gonna go get that fixed here. But we have an 8-gamer on Monday, and this one is actually shaping up to be somewhat interesting. We're looking at not quite the full excitement that we had yesterday with a semi-split slate between the early games and the late games. But we've got all of these tipping off here at 9 o'clock. Just scanning to see if there's any really, really important injury news. The only thing we're really looking at is Zach LaVine is going to be out once again, and that really is about it. Kyle Anderson is going to be questionable. He's been dealing with an ankle sprain, and of course, Austin Rivers and Kelly Oubre were traded, so they are over there with Phoenix now, but we don't know if they're going to play or not yet. They still have to clear physicals. So I suspect we will find that out around lunchtime if they're going to play tonight or if they will make their debut in the next game with Phoenix. But let's start her off here, Adam. We have Milwaukee. We have Detroit. We've got Giannis Antetokounmpo, which should be very nice. We've got Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, Eric Bledsoe. Middleton is probable. Dealing with a sore hand, and then Malcolm Brogdon, I believe he missed the last game with a hamstring issue. So that both those guys are listed as probable. Start us off here for a happy Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, so with Middleton and Brogdon due back, obviously you don't have the Pat Connaughton value or anything like that coming from Milwaukee anymore. But still, I think, appealing price tags on some of the Bucks. We'd seen Middleton's price tag come down a bit before he missed the last game. So I'm trying to get that loaded up right now. And of course, my computer's taking its time. But I'm assuming Middleton's price tag's still down in that low 6K range. He's still a tournament play for me just because people aren't playing him. And really the reason he's been playing so poorly is just that he hasn't been shooting well. So I still think that that's an interesting price tag. And then Giannis, it's not a great spot for him. Detroit has been reasonably good defensively this season. It's not a pace-up spot, but it's still just an absolute, freak in terms of what he can do from a fantasy standpoint. So tough to prioritize him over, like Russell Westbrook against Chicago. But at the same time, this game is more likely to stay competitive. So it does make for a really good Giannis spot, I think.
Excellent. If we're looking here towards any of the shooters, it seems like everybody's healthy once again here for Detroit in their backcourt, so that's going to kind of chop up the minutes. But Reggie Jackson checking in at 5,200 on DraftKings has been somewhat intriguing recently. We know he does have a little bit of upside. He hasn't really flashed it for the last few games, but he has topped 30 fantasy points in four of his last 9. So it's there. It's right on the borderline at 5,200, but he is someone that you can always use for your placeholder lineups at this point in time before anything exciting really comes to pass. On the other side, I do like Eric Bledsoe, who has also been inconsistent, but he does have a 40 fantasy point upside, which is something that's nice to get in tournaments because that will get you set up with the possibility of quote exceeding value, and that is how we've got to win these bad boys. What do you got here for the rest of Milwaukee?
So Brooke Lopez, actually, it's something that I talked about the last time these two teams played. And he had a decent game, but it ended up not being as good as it could have been. But it's actually a favorable matchup for him in that Drummond is going to have to chase him around, and that's not something that Drummond is going to be very good at. You should get a lot of open looks for Brooke Lopez. Blake Griffin most likely won't be defending him because he'll have his hands full dealing with Giannis or Middleton. So I think that Brooke Lopez is a pretty interesting play here. He's had success against Drummond in the past. Obviously different team and different situation, but I think it's just a matchup that suits him well, and it's worth taking a tournament flyer on Brooke Lopez at a cheap $5,100 price tag.
All right, chat's giving me hell for not combing my hair. I've actually showered. I got a haircut on Saturday, and it's apparently it's gonna be poofing up here on the top a little bit. So yeah. I've been up since 6:30. I was just screwing around and then waited till the last minute, like always. Human rain delay, as it's been pointed out to me. Apologies, but it's Monday. Come on, somebody's got a case of a Monday. I think a half dozen people got a case of the Mondays here in chat. Looking over here to the Detroit side of things, once again, we have Andre Drummond, who is intriguing on draft, which you can get him with your first or second pick, and I like him for differentiation today. Normally over there, I've been waiting till the fourth or fifth pick to get some centers, but I do like this matchup for him. He did not show out very well in the last time these teams met at the beginning of December. However, it was just a crappy game in general for Detroit, and they lost 115 to 92. So I like where he's been recently. We know he has 2020 upside, which is fantastic. His last couple games, 19 and 20 rebounds, 14 and 13. Yeah, not too bad. Still got 40 fantasy points there. 21 and 17, 23 and 19, 21 and 11. That's solid numbers there. So he is someone, if you play over on that side, I would recommend today, which is kind of funny because, like I said, I usually wait on center there with how deep the position has been this year, Adam. Looking at Drummond, looking at Blake, is there a preference that you have amongst those two?
Yeah, I actually like Blake a little bit more here. For one, his price tag's finally come down. He's cheaper than Drummond is on DraftKings after being $300 to $400 more expensive for a while. But also, I mentioned Drummond having to deal with Lopez, and he really has not been productive in games against him in the past. Not that I care all that much about how one player has done against other players in previous seasons, but if you go back to the start of the 2016 season, the highest scoring game out of 6 that Drummond's had against Lopez is like 43.8 DraftKings points. And it just makes sense that, you get him pulled away from the basket a little bit more, potentially more rebounds for Blake as a result. So between the two of them, I actually prefer Blake, which is not how I normally feel.
So both of us are kind of going out of our comfort zones here on different players in this first one. So there we are. Well, that's why you play the games, and that's why we get to say, oh, it didn't go my way, Adam. It was variance. And if it went my way, I'm the smartest person in the world. It's the perfect cover. The perfect cover. Anything else you want to mention in this game? I'm assuming you're not as intrigued by the Detroit backcourt with everybody healthy again.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Reggie Jackson, and I agree that for tournaments, the price tag is nice because if he gets 30 minutes, he should, beat that price tag pretty easily. It is a huge pace-up spot for Detroit. The issue is just the minutes. Even with Ish Smith out, we're seeing Jose Calderon play meaningful minutes. In their last game, Jackson and Calderon each played 24 minutes. 2018 NBA, I did not expect Calderon to be someone actually stealing minutes from Reggie Jackson, but it's happening. And so that's something you have to keep in mind from a floor standpoint, but clearly still has ceiling at that $5,200 price tag.
Yes, one of those oddities that happen in NBA. The old guys like me represent. All right, let's meander along here. to our next game. Again, we've got 8 today, so this is going to be a fun one. We have Phoenix and New York. As we have mentioned on various shows, there was a finally the trade for Kelly Oubre and Trevor Ariza went down directly between the Wizards and Phoenix. So Phoenix is now acquiring Austin Rivers, who should help out their point guard issues from a real basketball standpoint, but of course that is going to mute the potential here for Melton, and I don't know. I think Akobo's probably going to end up staying down in the G League or bouncing back and forth on that two-way contract. Assuming that we'll start off with this first. Assuming that Oubre and Rivers are going to make their debut tonight, what do you like for the Suns?
It really makes things a mess. The rotation here, outside of like Ariza and Ayton and TJ Warren, it had been kind of difficult, when Devin Booker was out. Now you have Booker back in there. And so that's, even fewer minutes to go around for the peripheral guys. So I'll probably stay away from them, if Oubre and Rivers are in, just because I want to see how that plays out. But obviously with Devin Booker being back, he's the focal point of this offense. He really does everything for them. It's a nice matchup against the Knicks. Only 8,500 on DraftKings, I think, is a perfectly reasonable price tag. And then you can also obviously look to TJ Warren at only 6,700. Should play 34 to 36 minutes for Warren. Not a good Knicks defense. Reasonably fast-paced team. So I think those two are interesting. But beyond that, I expect minutes to kind of just flatten out for guys. DeAndre Ayton is a little more expensive than I would like, especially with his with minutes concerns of his own. So really Booker number one and then Warren number two for me.
It's well, at least they're both healthy at this point. That's been one of the big frustrations with those two, and the lack of updates, or shall we say uncertain updates. But it's nice to see those guys should be comfortably in our lives today. Looking over here at the Knicks, of course, we do have Trey Burke kind of is back from. Let me see. I want to get his game log up. He played in their last game. He played 12 minutes after missing half a dozen games. So that just is going to further muddy what's going on there. Emmanuel Mudiay had a moment. Adam, he had actually a couple good games with the absence of Trevor Burke. His NBA points over the last 3 were 18, 34, and 16, and those are amongst 3 of his 4 highest scores on the season. So that was good to see. He was playing a pile of minutes, getting 30, 41, and 30 in that, where prior to Burke going down, he had been just kind of mired in the mid-20s there. With Burke back, do you want anybody in the New York Knicks backcourt? Wait, I know we don't want anybody in the New York Knicks backcourt. Will a few appear in your lineups?
Yeah, I mean, in the game against Indiana yesterday, you still got 30 minutes from Mudiay, only about 12 and a half minutes for Trey Burke. So Burke being back, it lowers the floor. Not that the floor was that high anyway, but it lowers the floor because it's another body that is capable of going out there and getting hot and stealing a bunch of minutes. But, it doesn't do anything to the projection really, or the upside for Mudiay. The price tag's getting to a point where there's certainly, I think, just as much risk as there is reward. It's not like you're talking about, a 5K Emmanuel Mudiay anymore. He has to actually get his minutes and be productive with them to, make you happy that you rostered him. So out of guys on the Knicks, he's probably like my 5th favorite option because, Tim Hardaway at 6,600, he's inconsistent, but at least you're going to get the minutes from him. So I would prefer him. And then there's a handful of guys that are there's a couple guys that are cheaper, and then Enes Kanter is my favorite play on the team. So it's tough for me to prioritize Mudiay for sure.
And that definitely makes sense. You mentioned Kanter in there. Reasonable matchup for him. I like the veterans going against these rookie bigs. They tend to get the old guy, like me, the old guy basketball with the tricks and such. Looking to someone like Kevin Knox, Noah Vonleh, anybody else here that pops for you with the Knicks?
Yeah, I like both of those guys. Knox is just playing monster minutes now since joining the starting rotation. The usage has still been there for him as well. There was certainly a chance that you were going to see him not get up as many shots, playing more minutes alongside Tim Hardaway and alongside Ennis Cantor. But in his three starts, he's still sitting at about 22% or 23% usage rate in two of the three games, which is down from what he was doing coming off the bench, but it's still plenty productive. He's gotten 15 field goal attempts in all three of those games. So even though the price tag's coming up with the amount of minutes that he plays, I still think he's a strong play. Noah Vonleh here, I don't like quite as much as Knox just because I expect him to play fewer minutes, but it is a favorable matchup against Phoenix. It is a terrible rebounding Phoenix team, which is why I love Ennis Cantor. But for Vonleh, he should benefit from that as well. And then it's also just a poor Phoenix defense, which means that, obviously Vonleh should just be more productive overall, but also he should most likely convert on his potential assists a bit more. So I would put him behind Knox. I'd put him behind Cantor. And basically about even with me point per dollar for Hardaway as Hardaway.
All right. Looking down for any of the cheapies, nobody really that exciting. Damian Dotson has moments, but he's dealing with the sore shoulder. We have Mitchell Robinson, the human, 6 foul per game blocked shot extraordinaire. Saved me on a couple different Sundays, Adam. I play a weekly league, yes, season long. It's long. It still does happen. But he has saved me over the weekends winning a category. So I always look to see what he's doing and then would never play him in daily fantasy. Heading over to our next game here. This one is going to be a fun one. It's a 231 over under. It is the Sacramento Kings taking on Minnesota up in Minnesota. The Timberwolves are favored by 8. This should be a nice up and down game. We've got phenomenal numbers from Karl Anthony Towns now that Jimmy Butler is out of the mix. He will be going against Willie Cauley-Stein. Talk to me about Cat.
I love him. I've liked him pretty much every slate, probably for the last 3 weeks, and this one's no different in a fast-paced game against Sacramento. The price tag, obviously has come up a bit, but I think deservedly so. I mean, the guy's averaging about 1.38 DraftKings points per minute without Butler on the floor this season. He's been in that range since the trade as well. Up around a 28% usage rate, a 20% rebounding percentage since the Butler trade. So, and also can play 38 minutes in competitive games. So expecting to get 36 to 38 minutes from Cat here in a really favorable matchup. I have no issues with him at 10K price tag.
And he's one of those guys that has just really destroyed Willie Cauley-Stein in his last 7 games against Willie Cauley-Stein. He has topped 56 fantasy points 5 times and topped the 60 mark 4 times. According to DraftKings, his 2 worst performances were 44 and 46. Of course, that does not guarantee what he will do tonight, and we do have that 5-figure price tag, but those are some numbers that we'll want to keep in the back of our mind. Again, we are looking at the NBA, and it feels a lot like it's spring, and people don't care anymore, and people are getting rest, so that means, hey, there will definitely be some value appearing throughout the day with 16 teams in action. Just sticking with the centers here, Willie Cauley-Stein has done all right in those similar matches, or in those same time frame there against Karl Anthony Towns. He has topped 30 fantasy points 4 of the times, a couple teens in there, and then 1 in the mid-20s. So not quite as exciting there as Karl Anthony Towns, but on a point per dollar basis, he's right there in consideration at 6,400. Are you looking to Willie Cauley-Stein at all this evening?
Not as a priority or anything like that. He's just priced too closely to Ennis Cantor for me.
Okay.
The spot's phenomenal for Cantor, about as good as it gets for the game that Cantor has. So playing Cauley-Stein at basically the same price point with similar minutes projections. It's not even like you can really confidently project Cauley-Stein for more minutes than Cantor. It makes him a secondary option just because I think there is a pretty big difference between the two of them.
All right, and I do want to mention that Sacramento is coming off a back-to-back. They played last night in Dallas, got a 7-point victory there. But some of the minutes here, we'll focus on them for the Kings just for a moment. We've got Bjelica played 35, Willie Cauley-Stein 32, Fox 33, Hield 39, Bogey got 37 in there. So just I mean, it's something to keep in mind. Potentially as a tiebreaker, it's not exactly a short flight from Dallas up there to Minneapolis, so you'll want to just keep that in the back of your mind there. Focusing here on the remainder of the Kings. Oh, Lisa, hey, how about a Hey Remember Me game? He had a nice game yesterday. Had 4 blocks, which really boosted his total, but he was close to 40 fantasy points depending on your scoring system. Do you like him? Darren Fox? Anybody here from the wings or the backcourt?
Yeah, I have interest in Bielitsa just because Bagley being out certainly gives him the opportunity to get more minutes. Obviously we saw monster minutes last game. We saw him play almost 30 against Minnesota last week. But Bagley being out just means that if Bielitsa is playing well, it's easy for him to stay on the floor because you no longer have a mandate to play Marvin Bagley his 28 to 30 minutes. So I think that at a really cheap, $4,400 price tag, Bailey's is a pretty strong play here. Things can certainly go wrong. The Kings have the bodies to play other guys if they so choose, but I think that more often than not, you're going to get a bunch of minutes for Bielitsa here, and the price tag is cheap enough for a guy that does produce well on a permanent basis when he gets the minutes.
All right, we may. This is from DJ Suave in chat. He says that reminder: it is Buddy Hield's birthday today. If you're into that sort of thing, so it is a back-to-back. We'll have to see if there's a birthday game. We had talked about this a little bit on the Saturday show. The one thing I generally want to keep in mind with the birthday games is what are they doing after the game? Because if they're playing the next day, you may have flu-like symptoms appear next to their names on the injury reports. So just a fun thing to keep in mind, because when you're going to make it rain at the club, why not do it on your birthday? Let's see. Looking over here to the rest of Minnesota, Robert Covington, 5,200. That is pretty solid here. He has disappointed in his last few games after having a nice run. He missed 4 games ago. He sat with an injury. This will be one. Be cognizant of what's going to go on here. Let me look and see what Taj Gibson is up to. He did miss the last game, which put Dario Saric into prominence here. Gibson should be back with the team and playing tonight, so that may take more minutes. Give him his rotation minutes back, which will take Saric potentially out of the equation, Adam. I do say potentially because he is someone that has ticked up to seeing mid-30s over his last 3, sort of corresponding with Covington being somewhat injured here. Do you like either of their former Philadelphia 76er acquisitions?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Gibson being back obviously makes it so you can't, basically guarantee that Saric plays a ton of minutes. But, as you said, Saric has been getting minutes anyway, even with Gibson there. The last time these two teams played, Gibson played about 16 minutes. Saric played about 32. Saric closed the game out. And we had seen that happening a little bit more frequently lately than we did, right after the trade. So from a tournament perspective, I still think that a sub 5K Saric is in play in a favorable spot here. Not something that I would be looking to in cash games just because, he really can range anywhere from like 20 to 32 minutes here. So it's a really, really wide range of outcomes, but that's something that makes him appealing in tournaments. And as far as Covington, I mean, he really disappointed in the game against Phoenix. He was one of my biggest stands on the field, and that did not work out at all. But it is a favorable matchup here. He is cheap. He should play, around 36 minutes. And it's a Sacramento team that plays fast. They'll give him the opportunity for defensive stats. So, no issue with Covington. Just kind of the same player that he always has been, though, in that he can give you a really good game. He can give you a really bad game. It's tough to feel really confident in him.
All right, and then just a reminder, this will be the 3rd time these two teams have squared off. They played last week, and then they played back near the beginning of the season. You can kind of go look at that last game and just see what they did with the various rotations. Remember, you can always check out Popcorn Machine or some of the other sites that give you the game flows and try to understand the rotations and who is on the court with their various opponents. Anything else from this matchup that you would like to cover, Adam?
I don't mind Andrew Wiggins either. I prefer Towns, obviously, if you can find the money. But if you can't get up to Towns, I think it's just such an appealing game where even if you can't get to Towns, you're still going to want pieces from Minnesota. And Wiggins is kind of the perfect guy to use in your non-Towns lineups, because if Wiggins goes out there and has one of those games where he just drops a million points, then it probably is coming at the expense of Karl Anthony Towns, which makes it so in tournaments you're using it as leverage to kind of bypass the Karl Anthony Towns teams, and it just gives you a greater shot at beating the field, basically, when you have someone like Wiggins in those non-Towns lineups instead of just not having anyone from Minnesota, because Minnesota most likely is going to score a lot of points. They're going to come from somewhere, and so there's kind of more utility, I think, in having a guy like Wiggins who can put the team on his back and can negatively impact popular guys like Towns.
All right, let's continue on here. An interesting thought here in chat. They're kind of asking, this is not related to a game today, but they're saying, why is Whiteside not playing in the fourth quarter for Miami? So one of the things that has happened, particularly more and more over the last couple of years as we've moved to some positionless basketball, a lot of times you're going to get some of the bigs that start the game not playing much down the stretch. They want somebody that is more of a scoring threat and is a little more versatile, because generally they're having to match up with some similar options from their opponents here. So this is particularly with Whiteside. Of course, he does have his little I don't know, tete there with Coach Spoelstra, but he is a good example of someone that generally doesn't play in the fourth quarter. Sometimes you'll see it with guys like Tyreek Evans. He hasn't been playing as much in the fourth for Indiana. It just kind of varies here. When you are looking at your baseline stuff, Adam, how often do you focus on? And I know you do this a lot for the deep dive, which is behind the paywall. It's the article series that you and Laffy do. How often do you look to see if somebody's on the closing unit, and does that impact a lot of what you're doing with your targeting of certain players?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that you want to go through and try and figure out if how things have been going the last few games as far as closing units go. Try and figure out, and like using Whiteside as an example. A lot of times you see it more often with centers than any other position. But you can look and it'd be like, oh, he hasn't closed 2 or 3 games in a row. But you want to figure out if that is by design. Like, is the coach going in with the game plan of, I don't want this guy closing, or is it due to matchups? Did Andre Drummond's a bad example because he'll play against anyone, but did the traditional center that I'm looking at face 3 super small teams that closed with a 3 at center, because that's going to make it so that he's not on the floor. And then you want to look at obviously the matchup that they're in, and if you have someone like Whiteside going up against a team that runs a traditional center for 48 minutes, then basically you're not afraid of him getting run off the floor in that matchup. The concern is that Bam Adebayo is a very good player. He's his direct backup, and if Bam Adebayo is playing really well, then sometimes he'll stay on the floor in the fourth quarter. So you still have to factor that kind of stuff in. But yeah, if you can figure out closing lineups based on matchups, it's one really easy way to kind of get an edge and obviously help you project minutes, because with positionless basketball, a lot of times just because someone played X amount of minutes in their last game, it doesn't mean they're going to play that same amount of minutes today, because it's a completely different matchup, and sometimes different players match up better with different teams. So yeah, paying attention to that kind of stuff and trying to predict closing lineups is obviously really important.
Okay, let's move along here to our, what are we on? Game number 4. We have Chicago heading to Oklahoma City, taking on the Thunder. Thunder are double-digit favorites. They're 12.5-point favorites here. We have a 2-12 over-under, and we've got darn near 2 5-figure players here. One, Russell Westbrook, 11,200 for on DraftKings, and then we have Paul George checking in at 9,500. I'm leaning a little bit more towards George here if I'm going to play one of these guys. These guys will probably not make my first few lineup builds unless I'm making a concerted effort to put them in. I just don't know if I'm going to have enough cheapies yet on the slate to go with these guys, as I think both are luxury plays, but they're phenomenal. If you were choosing between Westbrook or George tonight, which way would you lean?
George's price tag is getting up there, but I still really like him. If I can find the money, Westbrook would be the one that I go to just because it's Russell Westbrook and obviously his ceiling is sky high. But the position that George plays makes him appealing, especially on FanDuel where you have to roster the two small forwards. He really has not taken much of a hit since Westbrook came back. Still has about a 28% usage rate, still has about an 18% assist percentage, averaging close to 1.3 fantasy points per minute since Westbrook came back on November 19th. So George is someone that, kind of goes overlooked sometimes with Westbrook back, but really shouldn't. I agree with you that both, at least as of right now, feel like luxury plays just because you look in that price range and you have, Giannis at the same price as Westbrook. You have Towns essentially at the same price as George, obviously different positions, but similar price points. So it's not guys that I plan on prioritizing as of right now, even though it's obviously a good spot against Chicago.
All right, we've seen sort of cheapy Torrey Craig do quite nicely. He's scoring all of a sudden, Adam, double digits in both of his last two games. He is someone that I was using as purely a punt option. Feels a little unnecessary at this point with 16 teams on the floor, or pardon me, taking
Especially
hardwood.
because his isn't. So
Yeah. What? Pardon? Oh
I
shoot.
said, especially since Corey Craig's is not.
My apologies. I should not. I was. Oh. See, this
Come
is
on,
what
Steve.
happened.
Let's
Too
go.
many windows open. I was looking at the wrong thing. I was trying to go look and see here what Jabari Parker is doing and Chandler Hutchison. Hutchison had been out with an illness. We know that Parker is going to be out of the rotation per the awesome coaching there in Chicago. So I just started talking to buy myself some time here. And Torrey Craig. Torrey Craig. Oh, well. Well, you know what? It happens. Time for some more Diet Pepsi. Here we go. Looking at the Bulls here, Adam, what can we take out of this team besides Lauri Markkanen with the rest of the mess that they have going on here?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Dunn seems like he's, back. Obviously had a nice game against San Antonio despite dealing with foul trouble. Still played 36 minutes. With Zach LaVine out, I would expect him to play in that similar range here. It's a good Oklahoma City defense, and there's certainly blowout risk if that's something that you want to factor in. But Dunn is, pretty good from a fantasy perspective, especially without LaVine on the floor. Since last season, because basically we have zero sample size of Chris Dunn this year. But last season without LaVine on the floor, without Mirotic, and then obviously, Parker wasn't there. You had a 26% usage rate for Chris Dunn. He was at 27.2% in that game against San Antonio that LaVine missed. He got up 19 field goal attempts, but he also is someone that can pick up some defensive stats for you. He can rebound a bit. He's a pretty good all-around player, and if you're going to get around 36 minutes from him, I think he's a really appealing play, despite the relatively difficult matchup against Oklahoma City.
All right, chat is justifiably giving me hell for that one. They're accusing me of looking at let's say adult sites and other stuff. No, I never stray anywhere on my good computer here. I just got this, so I've got two spam programs running, and I'm not gonna muck this computer up. I have the worst technology luck, and the last thing I need is some sort of virus. So, no need for me to go to those sites. Besides, I'm married. Once you're married, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You don't have to worry about a lot of things anymore once you're married. Adam, this game, not as appealing as I first thought here. So I think we're ready to move along. Do you want anything else from either of these teams?
I mean, you mentioned Lauri Markkanen. I think he's fine. Should see plenty of scoring opportunities without Zach LaVine. The concern for him is just that this front court is pretty crowded right now. He did get 36 minutes against San Antonio, which was nice to see. But Bobby Portis only played 19 in that game, and it's tough to confidently think that Markkanen plays 36 minutes any night. Like 30 to 32 is probably more realistic in most games. So you get some variance there. But also he's someone that, at least going back to last season, and this is something that certainly can change, as he improves and, the situation in Chicago changes a bit, with LaVine out. But going back to last season, he just really has not been a very volatile player, which means that it kind of his upside isn't quite as high as some other guys, in that price range. If you just base it on prior performances and how far he deviates from his mean, so that's something to keep in mind. Like if you're looking at Markkinen or you're looking at Chris Dunn's been a much more volatile player, which in tournaments is actually good, because it just means that historically he's been the one that's more likely to give you a really big performance, here and there. So I like Markkinen, but it's, I think, a pretty correct price tag for him.
All right, so let's get on over here to Houston and Utah. This game, of course, will be in Houston between the Jazz and the Rockets. Looking at Houston, they play at the second slowest pace, and they have the fifth worst defensive efficiency on the season. Utah has been trending up. They, with regards to their defensive efficiency, they're now ranked eighth on the season. They were bottom third there the early part, but things seem to be straightening out for them, and they're checking in at the 20th fastest pace on the season. So they're slowing down a little bit as they're improving on defense. Starting at the top here, James Harden. We've seen him do some phenomenal things against Utah. Another guy that feels like a luxury play today. What are you looking at with him?
Yeah, it's kind of the same. It's similar to how I felt about him against Memphis. Like, he's not going to be a priority for me as far as compared to other guys priced around him, but I'm certainly going to be paying attention to his projected ownership in tournaments, because there's just no question this guy has as high a ceiling as anyone on the slate. We've seen him be very, very good lately, and we talk about it a lot, that just because a matchup's difficult or a matchup is slow, it doesn't really change the ceiling. It just means that he's less likely to get there, and so you want to factor in ownership and figure out if it's worth pivoting to him. So it's a spot that I'll be paying close attention to. Like you said, Utah has been decent defensively. They're still a slow team, and this is a game that should be very, very slow in pace and kind of unappealing. But at a less than $11,000 price tag on DraftKings, I think that if the ownership is going to be like sub 10% on Harden, then it's certainly worth thinking about in tournaments.
I'm just looking at some of his historical game logs here. The one that I did have in mind was the 80 fantasy point performance in 35 minutes. That was back in November of 2017. Sorry, I'm going to have to get a cough drop here, Adam. Can you continue for us?
Yeah. And as far as the actual matchup goes, we have seen Utah kind of struggle in the pick and roll this at times this year defending it. So I know he struggled his last time. I know he struggled his last time out, but it is a matchup where it wouldn't be overly surprising to see him have a good game just because of how Houston runs their offense and what we've seen Utah struggle with at times this year.
All right. Poor Adam has to listen to me coughing because of the way I have my microphone set up, but I am able to mute it, I believe, for the other people out there. My apologies. Old school trick. I always have a couple lozenges by you, because once you start coughing and thinking about it, you have a hard time stopping when you're on air. Let's see here. My apologies. Looking to the Rudy Gobert, I think, is just the easiest way to say it. I would have. What happened to my filters here? There he is. Okay, he is checking in at 7,400. The one guy I like on the Jazz would be him in this particular matchup. The other guy I'm okay with is Jay Crowder. We have seen Favors and Crowder. They're starting to alternate starts depending on the matchup here after Crowder was coming off the bench for most of the games. Do you like either of those options?
Yeah, I think Gobert is fine. Again, like I prefer Ennis Cantor for a little bit less money. I just like the spot more for Cantor. But no issues with Gobert. He is a center that I think is obviously really good, and the price tag's very reasonable at 7,400. So yeah, no problems there. And then Crowder's, if you get there, you get there. Like, he's someone that normally doesn't give you a monster score. He did start the last game against Houston, which is worth pointing out. We will probably see him in the starting lineup again. Probably should play, around 30 minutes here. So don't have an issue with $4,400 Crowder if he does get the start.
Excellent. All right. Hopefully my coughing spell has passed for at least a few moments here. Wrapping up the remainder of this one, just the 213 over under, not quite as appealing. It's one of the lowest on the night, which is hilarious because only a couple years ago, 213 would have been one of the higher totals on the night, but everything is relative these days. Anything else from this game?
No, not really. I mean, Donovan Mitchell in tournaments is fine. So is Ricky Rubio. I think that actually they're both a bit underpriced on DraftKings. Like $6,000 for Rubio, if you're going to get 32 to 34 minutes against a not very good Houston defense, is somewhat appealing. Same for 6,800 on Donovan Mitchell. We know that he's very scoring dependent, but he can go out there and throw up a monster game in this spot. So not priorities for me because of the pace of the game and just how slow both of these teams play. But I think they are a little bit underpriced for their ceilings.
All right. A little fun housekeeping here. If you have not yet signed up for Osmo.com, what are you waiting for? You can check us out. 7-day free trial. All the bells and whistles. Use promo code DFS strategy, all one word. Go to the Osmo.com homepage. Click in the upper right. Join and select a package. And if you choose a package with the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, you will get that as well for your 7-day trial. The last field that you will fill out on that page is the promo code. Again, DFS strategy, all one word, will get you the keys to the kingdom, again, with Fantasy Cruncher add-on and Slack, which is a lot of fun. 3 more games here on our schedule. We've got Philadelphia and San Antonio, 224 over under in this one. A little bit higher than I would have thought, but San Antonio is not the defensive juggernaut that we are used to seeing. We have Joel Embiid here. He did not play very much against Cleveland because they had that game well in hand. He only played 30 minutes. So if you're doing a little game log surfing, that 38 fantasy points will stand out because it was his second lowest output over the last 2 months. But he was coming off a 66 and a 73 fantasy point game. We know that he does have tremendous upside. This one has nobody favored. Adam, wow, it's actually a pick'em. You rarely see pick'ems in the NBA. Somebody's usually favored by a point or such. So this one should be a tightly contested affair. Starting off with Joel Embiid at 10,600 on DraftKings. I feel a little more confident looking to him than I do some of these other guys nearing the 5-figure price tag or exceeding it. Do you feel the same way?
Not really. I mean, I think that he's fine, but with Jimmy Butler back, it just kind of feels like an elevated price tag for Embiid. He got a lot more expensive while Butler was out, and we know that he's been more productive, in terms of usage, obviously, but also just in terms of how he's utilized when Butler's not on the floor. So I think like I'd rather go to Towns at 10K than Embiid at 10.6 in their respective matchups. It's not to say that I don't like Embiid, but there are plenty of spots to pay up on this slate, and he's just not the priority for me like he was in those games without Butler.
Any interest in Simmons? Or is that going to feel... Simmons is also... I'm only going to... So this is something we've talked about. Sorry to cut you off there. This is something we've talked about with the Fantasy Crunchers, creating a set of rules. Philadelphia is one of the teams where I do that, where I say don't play more than one of Butler, Embiid, and Simmons on any of my lineups because it's hard for 2 of the 3 to do well. In theory, we have seen them do it because anything can happen on any given night, but it's like trying to get something right twice instead of just once. So Simmons going against this patchwork backcourt for the Spurs is somewhat intriguing. How do you want to approach Simmons with Butler back in the mix tonight?
Yeah, I mean, he takes a little bit of a hit with Butler as well, especially because he plays most of his minutes alongside of him. I don't like that the price tag has actually come up a bit for Simmons. He was finally getting to a point where you could roster him pretty comfortably. Now he's pushing 9K again, and it's just a spot where I think he does fine, but it's pretty unlikely that Simmons gives me a score that I really need in tournaments at that price point. So out of these guys, Butler is actually the one that I'm most interested in taking a shot on in tournaments because he's the only one out of the 3 that I think is actually significantly underpriced for what he can do. In terms of a median projection, I think 7,400 for Jimmy Butler is perfectly fine. But this is a San Antonio team that just absolutely sucks defensively. And you have, a $7,400 Jimmy Butler who in close games we've seen, just take over some of these games since coming to Philadelphia. So we know that upside is certainly there where Jimmy Butler can go throw up 45 or 50 fantasy points and the price tag, gives us some excess value, I think.
All right, moving across to the Spurs, we were rewarded nicely with a LaMarcus Aldridge 40 plus fantasy point outing against Chicago, which was one of his better ones on the season. He played more minutes than we've seen from him recently because this was one of the games that the Spurs did not have in command, and they actually ended up losing. He is someone I'm okay with, but will not be looking to him this evening. Going up and down the roster here, I really am not intrigued by anybody on the Spurs. If we sit here and look at Rudy Gay at 6,100, that's all right, but he's either going to be going against Butler or Simmons, which isn't that exciting. DeMar DeRozan, we'll probably get the other guy guarding him. That's not going to be very exciting. And then LaMarcus Aldridge will be dealing with Joel Embiid. So none of this is matching up very well at all. I would be surprised if I have any of the Spurs pop up in my lineups, unless I randomly get a cheap punt like Marco Bellinelli or someone like that coming in. Would you look to any of the Spurs, or do you think your projections are just going to keep them out of your lineups this evening?
I absolutely love the price tag for DeMar DeRozan on DraftKings. He's down to 8,100. He has small forward eligibility as well. The minutes, like we've talked about with Marcus Aldridge, you've seen DeRozan's minutes fluctuate because the Spurs are so frequently involved in blowouts. But in competitive games, he's still playing 37 or 38 minutes. We've actually seen, ball dominant scoring guards have success against Philly this season. If you want to factor that in, DeRozan certainly fits the bill there. But, team leader in usage rate, team leader in assist percentage, just very, very involved in multiple ways here, plays huge minutes. I really like DeRozan. I think the price tag is just too cheap on him. Aldridge and Gay, I think, are perfectly fine, but DeRozan's the one I'd prioritize out of those three. And then finally, you have, Derek White, who his production is all over the place, and you can't really be that confident in his production. You can't be very confident in his minutes. He only played 18 minutes against Chicago, but he is in the starting lineup, and there's certainly the opportunity for him to play around 26 minutes at a sub 4K price tag. So whether you want to take a shot on him or Bellinelli or Forbes, it's kind of the same thing that we've been saying every time the Spurs play. Like, one of these cheap guards probably has a pretty good game, and sees. I think you just see them kind of play the hot hand with them, and it's basically impossible to figure out which one it's going to be before the game starts. But if you're running a bunch of lineups, they certainly should be guys, at that sub 4K price tag that you're willing to have exposure to, just not altogether.
All right, cruising along here with 2 games left. We do have Portland and the Clippers. Just a note, Damian Lillard was away from the team for practice yesterday for personal reasons, but he has apparently joined up with the team in Los Angeles. So no further word on that. So I'm not sure what he is, what he was focusing on, because hey, it was personal. But keep an eye on that just in case, whatever it is, if it flares up and he has to go be away from the team. That's something to keep your eye on. Yusuf Nurkic, Adam, he has been treating his backers well over the last few games, but as a result, his price has started trending up again into the 7,000s. I know he is one of your favorite players to look at for his fantastic point per minute production. Is this a spot for you? Because he's had one just dud where he only played 15 minutes and was not in foul. Oh, he got hurt. Let's see. Yep, he got hurt in the last game, so that's key. But in November, he dropped a 50 burger. Here, sorry, looked at the wrong one. He dropped. This is not fun today. My coughing, my looking at the wrong tabs. Get me out of this one, Adam, please. I'm going to lean on you. Do you, an easier way to say it, I was trying to do some nice little quick background information here. It's a Monday. Goodness gracious. What do you got here with regards to Nurkic going against potentially Montreal Harrell or Boban?
I'm very interested in him. The price tag has come up, but it's an example of a guy that you don't really want to look at that and be like, oh, he's overpriced now, because he's just been criminally underpriced on DraftKings in particular, basically all season long. So seeing his price tag jump $700 or $800 really is not very concerning, especially when you look at this matchup against a front court led by Marcin Gortat and then an undersized Montrezl Harrell, who Nurkic should be able to just absolutely wreck on the offensive end and on the boards. So I really like the spot for Nurkic. And if you look at the two games he's played against the Clippers this season, obviously one of them he played 15 minutes, so you can throw that out. The other one, he had 36 DraftKings points, which doesn't seem, very noteworthy, except for the fact that he only played 23 minutes in that game. He fouled out in 23 minutes, still put up 36 DraftKings points. He's averaging about 1.3 fantasy points per minute this season. And assuming he doesn't foul out of this one or get injured, you should see, around 30 to 32 minutes. Portland's rotation in their last game against Toronto was a bit annoying, to say the least, as all of the starters played less than 30 minutes. But if you look at the game flow there, I think that probably had a lot to do with it. The second unit came in and Portland went on a bit of a run. They went on an 11-2 run about halfway through the second quarter. So you saw that whole second unit stay out there a little bit longer than they probably would have. And then to open the fourth quarter, the second unit went on a 22-7 run. So I think that it's kind of just a game that we can throw out rotation wise. I would still expect, 30 to 32 minutes from Nurkic, as long as he's not in foul trouble or anything like that. One noteworthy thing to take away from that rotation, though, and it doesn't have to do with Nurkic, is that I had pointed out 2 games ago that Seth Curry DNP'd, and we had Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum staggering their minutes. So one of them was always on the floor, and that makes them more productive. They went back to Seth Curry playing backup point guard, virtually no minutes without the other on the floor for CJ and Lillard. So that's just something worth pointing out from that rotation.
All right, Lillard up there at 8,800. His price has been ticking down somewhat. He had been in the 9,000s. He hasn't had the best games recently, but we know he is one of the best fourth quarter players in the league and capable of getting absolutely on fire and just dominating. So he's someone that will probably be sprinkled in on my lineups. He's the most expensive guy in this game. Looking down the pricing list here, we've got Tobias Harris, Danilo Gallinari, and Montrezl Harrell. That is probably how I would rank the 3 of them today. Usually I like to look to Harrell or Gallinari, but I think the guy that I want is going to be Tobias Harris. If you're looking at the 3 of them, how would you rank their front court players?
Yeah, I mean, Gallinari and Harris, it really just comes down to any given night. It comes down to how their prices are, and I think that Harris at 7,200 has gotten cheap enough where I prefer him to Gallinari by a little bit, just because I think that he's a little bit more productive. But Gallinari is perfectly fine as well. Obviously he's coming off of a big game his last time out, but normally pretty low owned, at least on DraftKings. You see more ownership on FanDuel where you have to roster the 2 small forwards. But both those guys are fine. I think that I would lean Harris if I can find that extra $600 though.
All right. Anything else from this game as we continue our Monday morning?
Harrell at 5,700, I guess, is kind of interesting. It's not a spot that I love for him, but it's worth noting that he still played 26 minutes against Oklahoma City, which is a front court that has Steven Adams playing 34 to 36 minutes a night. Only played 32 in that game, I guess, but just the fact that they still gave Harrell all of the backup center minutes behind Marcin Gortat is worth noting, because we've seen Harrell's price tag just plummet. Like, he's down to 5,700 now, which puts him back in the range where he can outperform that in just 26 to 28 minutes. So still not someone that I would want to trust, but in tournaments, I think Harrell's fine.
All right, reminder, 24 days of giveaways continues here at Osmo.com. How you participate is leave a comment and rate the show. After we sign off on YouTube, the comment section will appear below the video. And anybody that puts in a comment will be part of the drawing today. The prize will be your choice for the lucky winner of any month-long sports package here at Osmo. If you're already a subscriber of Osmo, you can get an item of swag from our merchandise shop. If you want to see what we have, you can go to shop.osmo.com and check that out. Today's comment will be, who is your favorite NBA player for no good reason? It's a random question. So the two, here's for starters. So I liked Kurt Rambis when I was a kid because I had to wear glasses and he wore glasses. If you ever Google images of him, he wore these things called croquis that he was a spokesperson that kept your glasses from falling off when you were running up and down the court. I liked him. And then randomly, but I don't think I can like him anymore, Kelly Oubre. His style, Adam, off the charts, especially the fur coat that said, F you. on the back, which was fantastic. So those are the two guys I randomly liked. So use that as one of your comments. Is there anybody, any oddball NBA person that over the years has just made you chuckle and you like for no apparent reason, Adam?
I mean, Boban, I think, is obviously the answer right now. I'm with you on Kelly Oubre as well. I feel like there's someone when I was growing up that I really liked, and I just can't like think of who it was. Like I know Tracy McGrady was like my favorite player, but I can't. There was someone I know that I just liked, and I can't think of who it was.
Usually it's these players that they just aren't very good. Like my wife, she laughs. She's sad that Alfred Payton cut his hair because she would be cruising through the living room when I'd be watching the game, and if he was on, she'd always say, "Oh, there's the guy with the hair. How does he see?" Because especially last year when it was really, I think it was really affecting his play. He's
Michael
injured.
Ruffin, I think, is who I was trying to think of.
There we go. Completely off, just off the
Yeah.
boards. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. They put in the comments the NBA player that just makes you chuckle for whatever reason, and there is no good reason why you liked them. Finishing up our final game here, Adam. We have the Memphis Grizzlies going into Golden State. The Warriors are double-digit favorites. We have the lowest over-under of the night at 210. We know that Kyle Anderson is dealing with a sprained ankle, so he is going to be questionable, so you'll want to keep your eye on that. We've got Curry back and effective as hell. We've got Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. They're clearly the core four. Amongst those guys, how are you going to rate them in this particular matchup against the Grizzlies? To me, it seems probably like Curry just because he can get a shot off against anybody, but Michael Conley is a pretty solid on-ball defender.
Yeah, I mean Curry. I'm not going to say anything negative about him, but I do think that as far as the price tags go, Clay's is still really appealing. It's obviously not a good matchup, but there's just plenty of upside for him. He's still getting a ton of shots up even since Curry came back. And normally, because of Golden State's rotation, he's on the floor to start the fourth quarter, so he's a bit more blowout proof than Steph is as well. So I think that Clay is probably the guy that I end up with most in this particular spot.
All right. Just a quick little break. Here's some of the names Chad is coming up with: Rasheed Wallace, Darius
That's cool.
Miles, Penny Hardaway, Dennis Rodman. Rodman was just a piece of work. Horace Grant. Don't get him confused with Harvey, twin brother. Montiunas. A lot of people like Rashid. Oh, Zebo. A few comments here for Zebo. Oh, Georgie Murison. Also a good one. Ron Artest. There we go. That's what we're looking for. May not have been the best on the court, but for whatever reason, they drew your fandom. Back to the Warriors here. Outside of those top four guys, is anybody appealing from the remainder of the lineup with them? The one guy that has made it into a few of my builds recently, which was a bit of a surprise, but this is why you often like the agnostic number crunchers, fantasy crunchers, etc., is Jonas Jerebko. Minutes are middling once again now that everybody's healthy and Draymond is back, but he would be the one guy I generally look at and see if I like the matchup. Is there anybody outside of their top four options that you would consider for the Dubs?
Yeah, I mean, not that I really like, but Kevon Looney should play
Okay.
26 to 28 minutes at a sub 4K price tag with power forward eligibility. So if you get some of him, I think that's fine.
Okay. Moving to the other side here, Mike Conley. We've got Mark Gasol as obviously the two stalwarts. You've got Hacks and Jackson in the mix there. Any of those guys in a pace-up spot at their current prices here on DraftKings pop for you?
I think Conley's interesting. He's only 7,900 on DraftKings, which is a reasonably appealing price tag for the upside that he gives you. If this game does stay competitive, he should play around 34 to 36 minutes. And if it stays competitive, he's probably a big reason why. So no issue with Conley in tournaments. Less excited about Gasol just because the minutes have taken a hit with Joakim Noah, in the rotation now. So it's a little bit more difficult to trust him. You got 36 minutes from him 2 games ago, but then he came right back with a 32-minute game against Houston. I think you see 32 minutes more often than not. If Kyle Anderson's out, I think it helps to solidify Jaren Jackson's minutes. So that's worth worth noting. You saw him play a good chunk of minutes alongside JaMychal Green alongside Green and sorry, not Noah, just alongside Green in the game against Houston. Even though he dealt with foul trouble, he still got 30 minutes. So Anderson being out just opens up enough wing minutes where um, it makes it a little bit easier for Jackson to get playing time. So would have some tournament interest there.
All right. I think that's got us through everything here at Osmo. I'm just checking to see if we've got our ownership updated. It is. Yes, it is. So just here's some of the top guys here, Adam. Nobody is extremely overowned, but on DraftKings we have Belitza at 38%. We have Enes Kanter at 30%. Dennis Schroeder at 25%. That kind of pops with his $5,600 price tag. We didn't really touch on him. And then for you, Blake Griffin, 21%. So any of those feel egregious, or is that about appropriate for a first look here?
Who was the one you said before Blake? I was pulling up the Thrive site.
Dennis Schroeder at 25%. 5,600 is a very reasonable price tag.
That's certainly a fine price tag for him. Kind of overlooked him in that Oklahoma City game.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those seem pretty reasonable for right now.
And pretty much the same guys on FanDuel. Covington is up there at 20%, Lillard at 19%, and Fox at 19%. So always fun to look at that because you can see if you're missing out on somebody in that, a game, 16 teams in play, 8 games. $5,600 price tag there for Schroeder over on DraftKings is pretty solid. We are sponsored by Thrive, so we are going to do some Thrive picks. Adam is getting that all pulled up for us here, but this is kind of a fun game. You get 20 questions. Basically, these are player props. You choose 10 of them, and you get scored on if you are correct or not. Now, it's a binary, it's an either or, but the neat thing is very similar to wagering. You get juice or a little bit of a bonus on anything that is the less likely outcome. So this has been a little bit fun. It's stepping back and refocusing your thoughts on what is actually going to happen with stats. And you have to remove the bias of price points and price per dollar, which is something that I had not realized how ingrained that was for me when I look and value things from a fantasy or a probability perspective. So this has been a lot of fun. What do we have for a couple of our questions today, Adam?
Yeah, so first one, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo over under 23.5 total points. You get 105 points for the under, 95 for the over.
I'm going to go over. I think he gets 27 or 28 points tonight.
Yeah, I'm projected for about 26, which I think is enough wiggle room that I would take the over as well. Now, one of the guys in that game that I liked, Blake Griffin, over under 9.5 rebounds. You get 115 points for the over, 85 for the under.
I'm going to take the under.
I'm going to take the over. I have him right now. My baselines have him at 9.2 rebounds. As I mentioned, I think there's a chance that you see him, pick up a couple of additional rebounds because of the matchup. So with there being 115 points for the over, I would take the over here for Blake.
Okay. My one worry is DeAndre Drummond, which is built-in trouble for him. Let's do a couple more here. I'm gonna put that Thrive joining link back here in chat. Sorry, I had to pull it because I didn't set it up as a hyperlink. We're good. I'm going to be happy when I'm off air and not making mistake after mistake after mistake. I should have just slept in this morning.
You need to go take a nap when the show's over.
You know what? I think I do. I've been up for almost 4 hours, so it's about time for an old guy nap. Give us another question here, please, Adam.
All right, we got a fun one here on Ricky Rubio going against Houston. Over under 22.5 points plus rebounds plus assists for Ricky Rubio. 105 points shaded for the under.
I'm going to take the under. I know he can get it done a lot of different ways, but with both teams playing a little bit slower and a little bit better defensively, I'm going to take the under.
I have him projected right now for 23.5. So pretty good line there. I would take the under just because of the extra points.
All right. One last one here.
All right, let's see. We got. All right, someone I think we disagreed on during the show. DeMar DeRozan,
Okay.
over under 31.5 total points plus rebounds plus assists, 100 points for the over and the under.
I'm going to take the under. I do like that you called out the reminder of ball dominant guards doing well this season against Philadelphia. I'm still going to go with the under there.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the over. I mean, I think that it's just a kind of sneaky good spot for him. Yeah, so I'll go the over there on DeRozan.
All right. Reminder, the 24 days of giveaways. As soon as we sign off here, the comment section will appear at the bottom of the YouTube page. Give us a thumbs up. It does help out in the various algorithms. And your comment of the day is, who is the odd NBA player that you liked for no real apparent reason? We've got Muggsy Bogues. We have Monta Ellis. We've got Earl Boykins. Dan Marley, Thunder Dan Marley was a fun guy. Sean Bradley, unique guy. You can probably find it on YouTube with him batting in high school on his baseball team. Wow, all knees and elbows, and watching him hold the bat and get into a stance, something to behold. It looked like a human pretzel. But there we go. So we're going to get on out of here. You get the 2 o'clock, you'll get the A to B show with Andrew Barron and one Ben Raza. At 5 o'clock tonight, you will get the Deeper Dive with Adam and Laffy. And then live before lock will be Fast Eddie Fair and Chris Spags taking you down the home stretch. Of course, we've got some premium articles coming out for hockey and for basketball as well. So check that stuff out. And then on the homepage, there is a free article talking about tonight's NFL Monday night matchup from a single game slate perspective. So you can take a gander at that because, hey, the games are much more fun to watch if you've got a little something riding on them. With that, we are going to sign off. And I am not signing up for any more Monday shows, Adam. This has just been a nightmare. But that's all right. With that, gamers,